corpse, the parallels between the wicked priest of the scrolls and the historical figure of the high priest Ananus are unmistakable. In his book on James, Eisenman explores these parallels. James, Paul, and Ananus, on the one hand, the teacher of righteousness, the liar and the wicked priest, on the other, in exhaustive detail, he goes through the Habakkuk commentary and other texts, line by line, comparing them with information vouchsafed by Acts, by Josephus, and by early Christian historians. In our own pages, it would be impossible to do adequate justice to the weight of evidence he amasses, but the conclusions of this evidence are inescapable. The Habakkuk commentary and certain other of the Dead Sea Scrolls are referring to the same events as those recounted in Acts, in Josephus, and in the works of early Christian historians. This conclusion is reinforced by the striking and pervasive recurrence of Qumranic philosophy and imagery in Acts, in the letter of James, and in Paul's copious epistles. It is also reinforced by the revelation that the place for which Paul embarks, and in which he spends 3 years as a postulant, is in fact Qumran, not the city in Syria, even the one fragment that would not at first appear to fit the fact that the persecution and death of James occurs quite specifically in Jerusalem, while the Dead Sea Scrolls have been assumed to chronicle events in Qumran, is explained within the texts themselves. The Habakkuk commentary states explicitly that the leadership of the community were in Jerusalem at the relevant time. There is another point which Eisenman stresses as being particularly important in the letter to the Romans. Paul states that this is what reveals the justice of God to us. It shows how faith leads to faith, or as Scripture says, the upright man finds life through faith. The same theme appears in the letter to the Galatians 3:11. The law will not justify anyone in the sight of God, because we are told the righteous man finds life through faith. These two statements constitute, in effect, the starting point of the theological concept of faith. They are ultimately, as Eisenman says, the foundation piece of Pauline theology. They provide the basis on which Paul is able to make his stand against James, is able to extol the supremacy of faith, while James extols the supremacy of the law. From where does Paul derive this principle of the supremacy of faith? It was certainly not an accepted part of Judaic teaching at the time. In fact, it derives from the original book of Habakkuk, a text of Old Testament apocrypha believed to date from the mid-7th century BC, according to chapter 2, verse 4 of the book of Habakkuk. The